Hello fellow readers, I'm Stephanie and welcome back or to my channel. Today I am on the search for a book similar to The Love Hypothesis. Now, I think I mentioned in my 2021 recap, just like everyone else in the world, I loved this book. Obviously, the romance was there, it was steamy, it had grumpy sunshine. I loved the idea that it was in this science, realm of the university, and I don't know, I was here for it. So, this Valentine's Day, I am trying out 4 different science romances to see if anything can compare to the Love Hypothesis. So, that being said, let's get started. The first book that I tried out for this is The Lady's Formula for Love. It's basically about this one lady scientist in Old England, and she has to figure out this serum or something to help combat against what a radical hate group is kind of trying to attack people with. Because they're getting a lot of threats, she actually gets a bodyguard person to basically protect her while she's creating this, cure. And that kicks off our romance between this bodyguard and the scientist lady. I think I mentioned this in my January recap video, but it gave me very Bringing Down the Duke, that series. I think it's called League of Extraordinary Women or something like that, and it gave me very much that type of vibe. So if you liked those books, I think you'd like these books. It's woman feminist in this old era, with a romance. So they were pretty comparable in my mind. So into a little bit of my review of this book. I definitely feel like something was lacking for me in the romance section. So they kind of meet, initially dislike each other for a very short period of time, but then quickly just start lusting over each other. And there's a lot of that throughout the entire book, which for me, it just was a little quick. So I wasn't entirely in love with that. One thing that I did appreciate about them though is that they were both kind of older and established in their lives already, so that gave a different perspective on the love story. One reason that they were okay kind of being lusty right away and whatnot is because they both are older. I think she's already widowed, so she's had this whole love story previously, and they're just at that point in their lives where they're we don't have to really worry about anything anymore, we're just trying to enjoy our lives. So it allowed them to be feel free and bold in their decisions, and I definitely appreciated that. But overall, the romance was just kind of lacking for me. Honestly, I can't remember that much about the science side of it. It was definitely there, but wasn't too memorable, so that's a little disappointing. However, I did appreciate that there was this whole group of women who were trying to defy the norm for this time period and were, actively pursuing science. Overall, I gave it a 3.5. It wasn't the most memorable story, but it was a fine read. All right, the next book that I read was Remedial Rocket Science. It starts out with our 2 main characters. They meet in a bar and have this one night stand. And then years later, our main female character goes to the main male character's mother's company and gets a job there, which she didn't know about, but she ends up starting to work there. I forgot, I had to mention, she's in IT, and so that's how it kind of relates to science-y, STEM related romance. Overall, I feel like this story seemed way too long, even though like it wasn't really that long of a book, but the author just tried pulling it in so many different directions that it just dragged on at a certain point, and you're like, why are we like doing all these different things? I even like wrote down that like it feels just so flippy floppy, and like I would love this like premise or like, you know, like it, and then it would switch and I would be like, I hate it, and like it would just keep doing that, and I couldn't figure out why all these things were relevant to the actual story. And the same thing happened with the characters. Like I would like the characters and then I'd dislike them, and like there was no in between. Because the story like changed all those separate times and took us on all these weird tangents that really didn't add to the story, it just made it feel like so long, and that the story was so unnecessary. Also, I feel like for the first 90% of the book, they can't, like the two characters that are supposed to be in a romance can't figure out their BS. Like they cannot freaking figure it out. And so like the last maybe 10% of the story, they're actually in a romance and like doing that, but like that's so frustrating. Like if I want to read a romance book, I want there to actually be like a prevalent romance, not just like a will they, won't they, like do they hate each other, do they love each other, but like for the entire book. Like that's not what I want from my romance story. Just overall, this book was not what I expected. I thought it was going to be like an awkward fling, and then like you randomly bump into each other at work, and it was going to be like enemies to lovers because they had this like history that they're trying to ignore or something, but it just wasn't that at all. Overall, I'm not sure if it like wasn't for me because it was like such a slow burn and they didn't get together at like until like 90% of the way through the book, or if it was just not good. So if anyone's interested in slow burn, please read this and let me know what your thoughts were, and if it's just me not liking that. Either way, I ended up giving it a 3.25. Like there were definitely good aspects of the book, but like not many, and they're kind of overshadowed by just like the mess and like length of the book, like how it just drags on. So I don't know, that's where I ended at. The next book that I read is Love Proof, and this book is basically about a female like child prodigy who goes to college, and she is taking all these like extra classes trying to basically do some research on time. And she gets in a relationship with one of the guys in the story, and she basically starts giving up on like her science side and giving up on some of her like dreams that she had previously because she's like so enamored with love. And so this guy ends up breaking up with her so that she can like go on and figure out, you know, herself again and whatnot. And that's the basic premise of the story. This book is looking at the theory of time, right? And one of the things that she's trying to look at is how do our emotions impact how we perceive time, or does time actually like speed up and slow down, like all these things. And let me just tell you, I don't know if the book was trying to do this, but it definitely messed with time. Time was so slow in this book. I feel like the entire book was just an experiment for the reader to be like, yup, that definitely messed with time. And like not only that impact on like you as a reader, but also like it was just so odd how the author pieced together the story. Like it would flip from like past to present, but like there would be big chunks of like past that like were not delineated any other way. Like typically, you know, you would throw like a past or like a time period on there or something, or like put it in italics or something so that the reader understands that like, hey, this big chunk is going to be the past. And like it didn't do that. Like, it was just like their normal numbers for the headers of the chapters, and so that really threw me off. Every time it would be like, why are we in the past, why is this relevant? And like, going back to that, I feel like most of the things that it covered was just like not relevant. Like, the author had a big problem with like show me versus tell me, and like she just wrote all these huge paragraphs and like chapters of things that I was like, was this really necessary? Like, you could have just showed me this and like how it actually played out in their current life, rather than like going back and writing like pages and pages like to tell me all these things that happened. And like, all those unnecessary like scenes really took you out of the story, so it just made time feel that much longer. It just seemed like such a mess, and I really was not digging any of the characters in this book, honestly. None of them. One thing to note about this book that was like actually interesting is it was a lot more science focused than any of these other books that I've been reading. Like, all these other books are set in the realm of like STEM, but like it's not really an in-depth like look at it, versus this book, like they were definitely throwing like random science facts at you during the entire time. Like, it was actually a key part of the book. So that was interesting. I don't know if it necessarily added to or detracted from the story, but it was just interesting to like learn some fun facts. There's like a part 1 and a part 2 or whatever, and like the part 2 just randomly skips like 25 years, and then like now we're like seeing her interact with the main guy character's son that he had with some other lady, and like then I was really worried there too, and I was like, are they going to have like this son fall in love with her as well, like follow in his dad's footsteps? I don't know. The whole thing was just like a big mess. And then again, another example of like the author's playing with time, because like really randomly we're going through one part of the story and that's like, huh, JK, 25 years later, and it's just, it seemed like such a mess. I really did not enjoy any part of the 25 years later section of the book. Not one. For the first part of the book, I was, gonna be a little bit lenient and give it like a 3-star. And then when we hit that like 25 years later part, I was like so done. So I definitely gave it a 2.25, which might have still been generous, but that's where I landed. I was really not a fan of this book. I was really hopeful for it, and like it did not deliver. We're really bringing it back up though with this last book that I read. The last book is The One. Now, this book is also like science romancy, and it follows a similar idea to, what book is that called? The Soulmate Equation, where basically there's this app that will use your DNA to figure out who you're supposed to be with. And while the Soulmate Equation took more of a romantic comedy approach, this one's a little bit more of like a mystery, like, I don't know if I'd say thriller, but like maybe thriller, that type of book. So it was very different from the other like science romance books that I read earlier in this series, or earlier in this video. And I appreciated that. This book is kind of like a Love Actually type of story, where we follow all these different like timelines that like don't really mesh too much. And so we see like, I think 5 or 6 different groups of characters, all seeing like what happened with this Match Your DNA program. We kind of see all of these storylines like are revealed within the first 20% of the book, so I'm just going to talk about them because it's not really a spoiler. But basically we have 2 characters who are matched together, but the fun thing about them is that one of them is a serial killer and the other is a police officer. So like there's a lot going on there with trying to like hide the serial killerness of the main character. There's another 2 people who are matched, but the guy actually just died, and so she will never get to be with her match. There's another match that's like this whole catfishing situation. There is another storyline with two people who are engaged, and they decide to take this like match your DNA to see if they actually are soulmates or not, and he actually gets paired with a man and like learns that he's actually gay. And then there's a last storyline with actually the creator of this match your DNA and like her relationship that she got matched with. For half of the book, I feel like we're just following their normal lives and like establishing what exactly is happening. So like that's kind of slow, and like in my point of view, it was kind of boring. I was like, okay, I get it. These are like their lives. Like, is this really going to be the entire book? But then the second half comes, and the second half starts bringing more of the drama. It is leaving on like lots of cliffhangers, every single like switch between people. And in some books that I've read, I feel like you get more attached to one characters, so when it leaves on a cliffhanger at the chapter end and you switch into another character, you just want to skip the next character's whole story. But that was not the case for this book. I was actually intrigued and like into every single character's story. So like even though it left on a cliffhanger, I was just as excited to like get through the next chapter with the other characters until we got back around to like the characters who left on a cliffhanger. So kudos to that, because that's like impressive to have the reader be that intrigued with every single story. And let me just tell you, some of these like cliffhangers and like the twists in the book, they're good. I really enjoyed it. And like, I don't want to say anything because like it's a pretty short book. You guys should just go read it yourself. But like, it was good. So at the end of the day, looking at the two halves of the book, I ended up giving it a 4.0. I really enjoyed the entire storyline. I'm definitely glad that I read it, but you know, it just wasn't like top tier for me. So yeah, the 4.0 is where I gave it. So in conclusion, did I find any book that lived up to the love hypothesis hype that I needed for this Valentine's Day? I'd say no, not really. If you wanted like a true like rom-com type of book, I guess I would suggest that Soulmate Equation that I mentioned during my discussion of the one. As I would think, I think that one's the best comparison to the vibes that this book gave off. But I would highly suggest the one as well if you want something that is love related but a little bit different with higher stakes. Either way, I am definitely waiting for Ellie Hazelwood's next book in the novellas that she's publishing later this year. If you liked this video, go ahead and like and subscribe down below. And if you have any good suggestions for STEM related romances, please let me know, because obviously some of these in this reading vlog were a fail, and I need to find more books that are actually good. And if you made it to the end of this video, then go ahead and leave the DNA emoji down below for Match Your DNA in the one. Until next time, keep reading. Bye!